Hello, and welcome to another edition of Resting the Starters. I am, of course, your host, Adrian Marchese, and I'm joined as always by Casey Fleming.
Bengals, Super Bowl 2018. Book it.
And Rob Paul.
The Panthers took dope Toby Gerhart 2.0.
And today we're talking
Goose eggs.
Draft lotteries.
A whole lot of NFL draft.
A fantasy perspective.
But first, let's go to the old Twitter box for our first ever tweet of the week. And this week's tweet of the week comes from @RonMexico7, and he asks, I only follow Japanese baseball and some other animal-based sports, but was curious as to how Rob Paul's first week in the Korean League went. I tried to Google, but I can't read Korean. So Rob, how'd it go?
Every swing I've taken has resulted in a home run. Every pitch I've thrown has resulted in a strike. I lead the country in home runs, RBIs, wins, saves, and strikeouts.
And I heard a rumor, Rob, but you joined mid-season and already leading all these stats somehow?
Yes, I am dominant. It's an easy league to play.
I thought you were going to lead into every breath I take. The way you, like, every swing I take.
Every pitch I make. Wow, thanks for the update, Rob. And if you want your tweet or question read and mocked on here like we just did, tweet us @RTSPod. The more the merrier. Don't be shy. And for our first feature of the week, we're going to go with goose eggs. And Rob, tell us what that's all about.
So, just playing off my Korean League numbers, I also lead the country in goose eggs.
What's a goose egg, Rob?
Goose eggs are this idea Nate Silver from 538 came up with. So they're named after Goose Gossage because he ranted about saves. Saves kind of nowadays pigeonhole the closers to only pitching and save opportunities, and instead of having them only come into the game in the ninth, they should be used when the game is close late to try and finish off the other team, regardless of whether it's like the 7th, the 8th, or the ninth inning. It just like put them in clutch moments because they're supposed to be clutch with the ice in their veins, but a lot of them pick up easy saves in the ninth, and it's not a great metric for the position because of that. So Goose made the point every pitcher in the bullpen should be able to get 3 outs with a 3-run lead in the ninth. So it's not that impressive when a closer comes out and gets that easy save. And then, so Silver's point is managers are managing to get their closer a save rather than their team a win. And he came up with this goose egg stat. And it's a pitcher's basically awarded a goose egg for any clutch scoreless relief inning they pitch, specifically for the 7th inning or later when the game is tied or his team leads by 2 runs or less. And the best part about, in my opinion, about the goose egg stat is if the pitcher pitches 3 clutch scoreless innings in the same game, so let's say you put your closer in the 7th because it's a clutch, like, you need to get out of this moment, and he gets through the 7th, and let's say he pitches in the 8th and through the ninth, and pitches scoreless relief innings, he would pick up 3 goose eggs for that.
And, of course, coincidentally, the all-time leader in goose eggs would be Goose Gossage.
Yeah, so Silver actually calculated every pitcher's goose egg stats, and Gossage was first all-time with 677. To put some perspective on that, he's just over 300 career saves, and while the all-time saves leader, Mariano Sandman Rivera, is number 1 all-time in saves with like 652, I think, he's only 4th in goose eggs with 614.
Yeah, and Gossage is 23rd in saves career, I think.
Yeah, that's it.
And your namesake, Raleigh Fingers, is number 2 in goose eggs.
Yeah, like I really enjoy the concept of this idea because the save has kind of ruined the way that, like, especially old school managers manage their team throughout the game. Like it gets to the point where if the heart of the lineup's coming up in like the 7th or 8th, they're not willing to throw out their closer because it's quote unquote not a save opportunity. And
Yeah.
that, in my mind, is absolutely ridiculous because what you're going to do is you're going to throw out your worst pitcher against the heart of the lineup just because of some specific stat. Like, you're more likely to ruin your chances of winning that game if you do that than if you put your best pitcher against the heart of the lineup. And if your second best pitcher then comes and cleans up the ninth inning after that against the bottom end of the lineup, like that makes so much more sense in my mind, matchup wise. And another thing that you see is it's not only ruining the way games are managed, but it's also ruining like salary and contract opportunities for like a lot of
It's
these
true.
insanely good pitchers. You look at Dellin Betances lost his arbitration case in this offseason, and he's making like $2 million this year, all because he didn't save games. But if you were to ask any Yankees fan, he was a top 5 contributor to their wins last year.
Yeah, and I think going back to the manager thing, we saw both examples perfectly in the Toronto Blue Jays playoff run, where Zach Britton didn't come out in the wild card game when you needed to win that game, and Francona used Miller perfectly and essentially dominated the series just with Miller.
Put your best pitcher out against the heart of the lineup. Like that just makes sense logically.
Yeah, and like think how stupid like the whatever the hell the relief award is now, the Rolaids relief award. Last I remember, like it purely goes to who has the most saves. Like there are other baseball awards like that, like Silver Slugger and stuff. But it's just a dumb concept. It's not going to the best reliever. It's going to the most solid closer on a really good team, and that's stupid.
Like your example, like with Francona using Andrew Miller in the playoffs last year, he's technically not even really their closer right now. But
No.
you'd be lying to yourself if you said that he wasn't the best relief pitcher, debatably the best pitcher overall on that roster.
Especially in the playoff run. Like he single-handedly he was a major factor in getting them to the World Series last year. Also, I kind of like just how fun the name of the award is. Like it would fit in perfectly with baseball. I don't know, Goose Egg. Like it's another fun baseball word, like Yauman's work coming out of the bullpen and stuff like that. I think it's a good stat to introduce into the league. Like saves are antiquated at this point.
Yeah, and I just want to hear like an old school announcer like coming in for the goose egg.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Even if they don't like actually get rid of saves and start using goose eggs, I like that Nate Silver's gonna be tracking it anyway, so it gives like
Yeah.
the Moneyball advanced metric people a better idea of how big an impact any given reliever has.
No, definitely. Is there anything else anyone wants to add to this? No? Okay, let's let's move on to another. Well, this wasn't too much of a hot topic, but let's move on to a relevant topic in the draft lottery. And I'm going to propose a question after the draft lottery, the NHL draft lottery occurred on Saturday night. And I'm going to ask what do you guys think about the draft lottery and if it really is serving the purpose that it's apparently trying to serve of creating parity. And is it hurting that? Is it helping that? Is it fair? Is it foul? What do you guys think?
I don't think a draft lottery can actually create parity, and I'm against the draft lottery. I think it's ridiculous that the worst team in the league, when they don't end up with the number 1 pick, so Colorado,
Yeah, they got screwed.
what did they end up with? Pick 4?
Yeah,
Pick 4. And I think that is the lowest slot they could have ended up with, like with how the lottery works, if I remember
A
correctly.
draft lottery is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense to me, and you get like the Oilers, for example, had all
Yep.
those years of the number 1 pick, and until they got Connor McDavid, a once-in-a-lifetime talent, it wasn't making them any better, really. So I just don't think the draft lottery is a smart way of playing it, and I'm a big fan of how the NFL draft just goes worst to first.
I think that's a big part of it. All three of us are big NFL guys. So that's a little more NFL draft guys, which we'll be talking a lot about in the later half of the show. So I think that kind of goes with how our mindset is. But like, just look at what happened in this year's NHL lottery. Not even to touch on the Oilers or anything like that. But the Avs ended up with pick number 4, and they're by far the worst team in the league. The Devils moved from 5 to 1. The Philadelphia Flyers moved from 13 to number 2. Like, that's just silly. And the Stars, who are already a good roster, who had a slumping year, moved from 8 to number 3. Like, a lot of that just does not compute when you're trying to create parity. And I'll bring up this point, which is a little conspiracy theories, but I think they could be rigged as well. Like, what are the odds of the Oilers getting the first pick, what is it, like 4 out of 5 years? And in NBA, the Cavs getting it all the time, trying to replace LeBron with Andrew Wiggins and stuff like that.
David Stern had the NBA draft lottery rigged for a fact.
I completely agree that a draft lottery is stupid. Like, I think it's almost to the point where it has the ability to hurt the chances of creating parity. Like,
Yeah,
I get the idea, like, you don't want your teams tanking in the middle of the
yeah,
season. So, like, in that sense, it creates a little bit of parity because it kind of, like, makes that relationship between tanking and getting a better pick a little bit more blurry. But realistically, teams are still going to tank if they don't think their chances are good. And at the same time, like, it has the ability to single-handedly take that number one pick away from the team that deserves it most. In the NHL, this was obviously the Avs, and it kind of limits the ability to create parity moving into the future. Because now the Avs are sitting there with the fourth pick, and they're going to get a guy that could help them, and like it probably will help them eventually, but it's not going to be a game changer. Like, it's not going to turn around their franchise like the first overall pick likely will.
Also, specifically for hockey, I think there's a lot of parity in the NHL already, and the draft lottery is rarely going to really shoot a team up unless it's a once in a lifetime or once in a generation kind of guy like a McDavid or a Crosby or an Ovi, I guess. But other than that, like who did Florida pick a few years ago? The defenseman,
Ekman Larson? No, was it?
no, Aaron Ekblad.
Ekblad, yeah, sorry.
Like he's a very good player, but he alone didn't change that franchise.
Absolutely. Honestly, and going back to Casey's point about tanking, I think this is all to avoid tanking in these sports. And when you're in the NFL, it's only 16 games. It's kind of weird to tank. But look at the Brooklyn Nets this year. They knew they weren't going to have their pick, and they were still by far the worst team, or almost by far the worst team in the NBA, and we're still resting the starters the last week of the season, the last game of the season, in a meaningless game, in a completely meaningless game for them because they don't have their own pick.
Yeah.
So this is not preventing teams from being bad, or punishing tanking. Teams are going to be bad. Pro athletes never want to lose.
And that's in a sport where, like, the better team wins the majority of the time. Like Rob was saying, like,
Yes.
hockey's inherently, like, it generates this parity. Same with baseball.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to win some games, you're going to lose some games, regardless of how good your team is.
Yeah.
In basketball, it's more the better team wins the majority of the time.
Like
you
the
can
Warriors
see,
last year.
yeah, exactly. Like you can see those teams coming. Like everyone knows it's going to be the Cavs and the Warriors this time because they're like head and shoulders above everyone else talent-wise. But in hockey, like it just doesn't make sense to me why you need that lottery because the worst team could beat the best team any given night.
And we're going back to the playoffs. How often does an 8 seed ever win a series in the NBA? And look at this year. We got the 8 seed beating the Chicago Blackhawks and leading in their second round series. Once you get in, you can win.
And just to touch on NBA, tanking for Wiggins, for example, bringing Andrew Wiggins to the Timberwolves, and like after they made the trade with Cleveland, and then the next year they pick up Karl Anthony Towns, so that's 2 number 1 picks, and they are still a bottom of the barrel kind of team. Like the picking up number 1 guys doesn't create parity necessarily, so I just don't understand why award a better team, a better player than the worst team. You know what I'm saying?
No, that's a very good point.
One thing that like hasn't been mentioned yet is that I think the leagues kind of like the idea of this not only to create parity, like whether or not you believe that or not is another thing, but they believe it clearly. But they also see this as another marketing opportunity. Like think of when the Leafs had the possibility of getting the first overall pick last year, like all of Ontario tuned in.
Or the McDavid sweepstakes. Like I was at a bar and every TV, even with like playoff hockey going on, every TV was on the McDavid sweepstakes and how close the Leafs were to getting the first overall pick that year. Like you're right, it's for ratings, a lot of it, I think, a part of it. And like going back to it being rigged, like they can put the best player, the generational player, Connor McDavid, whatever, in the spots to make the most money for the league.
Yeah, and like it's awfully convenient that Matthews, who isn't McDavid, but like was thought of as something somewhat close to that, just happened to go to the Leafs. Like, are you kidding me? Like
they were the worst team though. They did have the best odds.
They were, but still, like I don't know. Like I just felt like that was locked in, regardless of the actual draft happening or the draft lottery happening. Like I just assumed they were gonna make sure that the Leafs got him because he was by far the best player.
I understand that, but for me, actually, last year, I would have thought that if they were going to rig it, it was going Phoenix because that's a dying franchise. The NHL owned them for a long time. I'm not sure if they still do. And Austin Matthews is from Arizona. Actually, they're called Arizona now. But Austin Matthews is from Arizona, and the Leafs are always going to make money. That the ACC sells out every single game most of the time. Actually, even though they were going downhill a little bit last year. But the Leafs are never going to lose money. And I thought if they're going to rig it, it's Matthews to the Coyotes.
I don't know. I just think that they might have wanted to double down on that, right? Like, because we've seen the effect that it's had. Every Leafs fan that, like, even somewhat gave up on them is back on the bandwagon. They're diehards again, and like they're willing to spend even more on merchandise right now. And everyone went out and got a Matthews jersey because of it. Like, I think they're leveraging that huge fan base because they knew that they could make an insane amount of money on swapping the best player onto that fan base.
Absolutely true. Like, I will say this: this year's Leafs team maybe fall in love with hockey again.
Well, I'll be tuned into the NBA draft lottery, so I'm a little hypocritical. I don't like the draft lottery, but like Casey was saying, the fans will tune in.
Yeah, and that's a big part of it. It's all about, getting players in the play. I don't know, man. It's stupid.
Adam Silver won't rig it. He's a good guy.
I do like Adam Silver. All right. And with that, let's take a break and hear some messages from our sponsors. Hi, I'm Buzz Graley, Mayor of Jacksonville. And I'm telling you to come on down old Jacksonville way. Once you look past the house fires, the electrical fires, the dumpster fires, the fiery fires, the arson, the insurance fires, and the bush fires, we're really a fine old town. Just come visit. Honestly, if you're willing to visit Florida, why not Jacksonville? Brought to you by the Tourism Board of Jacksonville. Welcome back from break. Thank you to our sponsors, and let's move on to some NFL draft talk. First up, Rob, hit us with your favorite drafts from this past weekend.
So, I know this team caught a lot of flack for missing out on their guys, even though I think that's ridiculous. But the New Orleans Saints had my favorite draft. They came out of it with the top corner in the class with Marshawn Lattimore, maybe the most pro-ready tackle in the class with Ryan Ramczyk, who's a plug-and-play on the interior or at right tackle. They got a guy I'm super high on in Marcus Williams, the safety from Utah, who I think is the second best single high safety after Malik Hooker. And he allows some scheme versatility, so they can play Von Bell as a nickel and Kenny Vaccaro in his linebacker hybrid role, so he just adds versatility. And then a lot of people were kind of against this pick, Alvin Kamara from Tennessee, and we all know how much I love him. Yeah. And I had a first round grade on him, and he's perfect for Sean Payton because he's a good receiving back. I think he's the best screen back in the class, and he's a very good pass blocker. Like, he's the third down back they need because Adrian Peterson can't play those types of downs, and Mark Ingram's, like, he's okay, but he's not great. And they also came away with Alex Anzalone, the linebacker from Florida, who probably goes round 2 if it's not for injuries, and he's like a day 1 weak side backer for them. Yeah. And a podcast favorite of ours, Trey Hendrickson. They got him. They get him in the 3rd round, and he blew up the combine, and he dominated in college, and he's I think a perfect complementary pass rusher on the opposite side of Cam Jordan. And then even their last pick in round 6,
great flyer, yeah.
I can't. Not sure if this is how you pronounce his name, but Al-Qaeda Muhammad, the edge from Miami, who got kicked off.
Sounds good to me.
AQM. I just go with AQM.
All right, AQM, who got kicked off Miami this year, but prior to that, he was like talked about as maybe even a potential first-round pick, but likely a round 2 to 3 guy, and they get him in the 6th round. Low risk, high reward. It's a great late-round flyer.
Yeah, definitely. And I hate all these takes coming out in the last few days about how the Saints look like idiots. They wanted Mahomes. They wanted Foster. They did look stupid for being on the phone with Foster. But they still came away with an amazing draft. Like, Ramczyk was maybe the best tackle. And Lattimore was for sure the best corner in this class. And this looks way better with Lattimore and Ramczyk than it would have with Mahomes and Foster.
Yeah, Mahomes wouldn't have been worth the pick. Meanwhile, Lattimore is the best corner in the draft, and corner was their biggest need heading into the draft. It's a great pick.
Latimer and Marcus Williams are going to be sick in the back end of their secondary. Like this helps their secondary so much, and they need that a lot.
Their defense,
like Foster would have been. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say their defense got probably four guys who are gonna play significant downs for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Foster would have been awesome in this defense too, but like Ramchick, they need help there as well. Like I think that they look a little silly for the Foster thing, like being on the phone with him and Foster hanging up. But the Mahomes thing, I think that saves their asses. Like if I were the Saints, I'd be happy that the Chiefs just paid all of that capital to trade up in front of us for Mahomes.
Yeah.
And as for Kamara, no, it's okay. As for Kamara, I'm not as high on him as you are, but I love the fit. But I'm not super pumped that they traded it up for him, but the fit is great, and I think this is a really good draft all around. Speaking of Reuben Foster, I think I like this. They're not my favorite draft because I'm a Seahawks fan, so they can go screw themselves. But the Niners killed the draft too. Like trading up for Foster was a great pick. Getting
absolutely fleecing the Bears on that trade, get them to trade up for Trubisky, and at the same time still land the guy that you would have taken at 2 anyways.
No,
like,
what are you talking about, Casey? They wanted Trubisky. That's why they traded out. They love Trubisky. Let's trade out. All the teams wanted Trubisky. Like the whole NFL was trying to trade out for Trubisky.
And Mike Glennon.
Well, I think we're going to kick on the Bears a little harder later, but
the dream team.
The Niners had a great draft, and I hate to say that. Casey, what was your favorite draft?
Mine was more obvious than your guys's. It's the Browns, and I think when you qualify it with the fact that they had so many picks, especially high picks, it was kind of hard to screw up. But at the same time, like they came out of this draft with a lot of starting talent. Like they got Garrett first overall. They traded back and got Peppers. Debatable about that one. I don't know if I like that fit because he's more of a guy that you wanted to see go to a team that doesn't need to play him right away, and the Browns need starters everywhere. So that could have been a bit of a reach, but at the same time, like everyone thinks he has talent that you can build on. Then you come back and get Njoku, trade back up into the first round to get him, and he's a star player, like with star potential. And I don't know if they're going to actually use him that way because it's the Browns and you can't trust them to do anything properly. But that's clearly a good value there. And then you get the quarterback that falls into the second that a lot of people had as their either first or second quarterback overall anyways in Kaiser.
Yep.
So like it's really hard to complain about that value. And then you get the best player in the draft, Zane Gonzalez, in the 7th round. He is going to make their team, and he is going to be the highest scoring Brown in existence by the end of his career.
As for me, my favorite draft, much to your guys' chagrin, was the Baltimore Ravens. But let me just say this. I think there was very few bad drafts as a whole and lots of really good drafts. So I got like a bunch of names written down. But the Ravens blew me away with Marlon Humphrey, who kind of seems perfect for like, he's got the length that, like, he's kind of like Jimmy Smith, but better.
Yeah, I agree.
Bowser out of Houston, awesome linebacker. I liked him a lot. They're trying to build this defense with this draft, it seems. Chris Wormley from Michigan, he can probably be 5 for them, 5 tech. Tim Williams, awesome pass rusher too. Him and Bowser on the edges, like that can kind of fix their pass rush and make like T-Sizzles 2.0, maybe both of them. Nico Saragusa, a guy I liked a lot at guard, late in the draft. They bring him in, help the offensive line. And Jermaine Illuminor, who I think he went in the 6th, not a great prospect, but people had him like the 3rd. Like Mike Mayock had him as his number 5 tackle. So that's a great project.
And I heard a lot of people kind of going against the Ravens there because they didn't go after a wide receiver. But that defense was already very good, top 10 defense. And they add 4 guys who are going to be instant contributors. And then to go and get Saragusa in round 4, who was easily the best lineman available at that time. I think he's a plug-and-play guy and will start day 1 for them.
Why would you want another receiver for Joe Flacco to throw terrible deep bombs to when you can win games 13-10 with an amazing defense? Like, we've seen great defenses carry their franchises to the playoffs and deep into the playoffs nonstop over the past few years. So, like, why would you want a receiver over having an amazing defense? Give me the defense all day.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I totally agree too. And they won a Super Bowl with only defense. So, as for other teams that impressed me,
Joe Flacco was elite that year.
no, Trent Dilfer.
Whoa,
Oh, yeah, you went way back.
don't
Yeah,
kick
okay.
him while he's down. He just got fired
Oh,
by
yeah.
ESPN.
Yeah, too
Sorry,
soon,
Trent.
AJ, too soon.
I'm so sorry. He's the best quarterback of all time. But as for other drafts I like, the Bucks put a lot of talent around Jameis Winston, getting OJ in the first, Chris Godwin, who's maybe a top 5 wide receiver.
Definitely a top 5 wide receiver, not a maybe there.
Okay, I agree. And Jeremy McNichols in the 5th. I think that's good value for McNichols. He's a good football player.
McNichols is almost like a poor man's Doug Martin to me.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, so I
That's pretty fair.
like the fit there, and you don't necessarily know what's up with Doug Martin. I think he could be a guy who will come in and run for 500 yards.
Yeah, and like they got Rodgers and Charles Sims. Is he still there, Charles Sims?
Yep. Always injured,
those-
though.
Yeah. And Rodgers is like he was pretty good last year, but he's not like a superstar at all.
He's a nice
And
third.
you round that. No, yeah. And you round that out with Justin Evans, another really good safety, helps out in the back end there, pairing with Vernon Hargraves in the secondary, and Kendall Beckwith, solid linebacker out of LSU, and Big Stevie out of USC in the I think in the 7th.
Yep.
So I mean that's a nice looking draft.
Yeah, like I like it too. Anytime you can surround your young QB with more talent, do it. Like we all see the Steelers and the Pats and the Falcons this past year, like
Yeah.
just surrounding their QBs, even though they're all great QBs. Like just get them as many weapons as possible. And this kind of actually goes against what I just said with the Ravens, but like you kind of need to. It's more so just in the sense that like you need a trump card. And their defense got a little bit better as the year went on last year, but if they can get a trump card in having an offense that's unstoppable as well, then why not go for that? Like in the Ravens case, like their trump card is now their defense, so now that they can win a lot of close games, but the trump card for the Bucks is clearly offense, so they just surrounded Jameis with weapons, and I like to see that.
Like Mike Evans already there, bringing in Deshaun Jackson in the offseason. Vincent Jackson's still there. And then adding OJ and Godwin and the platoon at running back is nice now with McNichols, Sims, and Rodgers and Martin if he's around. Like that's a nice group. Any other drafts you guys like?
Yeah, McNichols is going to look real good in about week 6 when Doug Martin's nowhere to be seen. Charles Sims is always injured, and whoever else Mike James is always there too,
yeah.
but he'll get injured too. So McNichols is going to lead the team in rushing.
I like the Bills draft too. Trading back from 10 to 27, adding a first round pick next year's draft, and still getting one of the best. I wish. I'll get there soon. Don't worry. Still getting Trey White at number 27, helping out the secondary. One of my favorite receivers in the second round, Zay Jones. I'm in love with that guy. Deion Dawkins, I like him a lot. Also in the second, he's going to help out the offensive line right away. Matt Milano's not bad. And my boy, Nathan Peterman in the 5th. That's great value for him. I could have seen him going in the 3rd. And they can do what they want with Tyrod now because Nathan Peterman is going to lead into like 25 Super Bowls or something like that.
Yeah,
So-
my question is like over under 3 years until they're in a Super Bowl and 4 years until they win one.
I say it's 4 years until they're in 4 Super Bowls and lose them all.
Oh, okay. Perfect. Like what outcome is going to end the game? Like is there a specific action or maybe a direction along with that action?
I'm not like this is a bold prediction, but I think like someone's gonna blow the game that's named after a small town in Ontario where one of our co-hosts is from, and it's gonna be like wide. I know I'm gonna go under. It's gonna be short this time.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Any other drafts you guys want to bring up?
We can just shit on the Bears for a while here if
Well,
you want.
We'll save that for a second. I want to bring up one more, if you guys don't mind, and that's the Indianapolis Colts draft. They got the best free safety prospect in the last at least 5 years at 15. I don't think, well, some people saw that happening like the day before the draft. Quincy Wilson, really good corner in the second round. Tyrell Basham, guy who's in the third round. People saw him in the second round talent. Excuse me. He's going to help in the pass rush. Zach Banner, not a huge fan, but it's all right in the fourth. Casey's favorite player in the world, Grover Stewart, out of Albany State.
Albany State!
In the fourth. Anthony Walker, really productive player out of Northwestern in the fifth. I think he's going to come in and contribute rookie year, I think, and that's a really nice-looking class.
Yeah, like that's one of the draft steals that I was actually going to touch on was Anthony Walker. Like I had him as a mid-third round pick at least. Like if you go back to his 2015 tape, he was unreal. 2016, he took a little bit of a step back, but he's still a quality starter, and he's a smart guy. Like he went to Northwestern, so that's all you really need in a linebacker. Honestly, like you need instincts, smarts, and like a little bit of athleticism, and you're around the ball all the time. So I could see him being productive enough to start in that defense, especially.
It sounds like you're describing Zach Cunningham, who went to a smart school as well, Vanderbilt.
And actually, let's not to bring
You
up
also
another
need to
team.
know how to tackle. So
Whoa, since when?
I don't know. Tell my high school coach.
Your high school coach didn't think you needed to know how to tackle?
Nope.
It's like lead. Is that why you have so many concussions? Always like lead first with the crown of the helmet.
That's literally how we learn how to tackle.
Oh no! Are you going to bring up a lawsuit against Norwood High School?
I'm just
NFL
having
style?
flashbacks right now. Like,
Oh no! I'm surprised those memories aren't just knocked right out of you.
oh no, they're just like flashing colors.
All right. Transitioning from kicking Casey while he's down, let's kick on the Bears while they're down. And Casey, I know you want to jump right in with that. Go ahead.
Are you kidding me? You trade at one spot to pick a quarterback that nobody really believes in? Like that's so bad. Like the Bears fans instantly were booing. Trubisky gets introduced at, what was it, a Cubs game the other day? Or was it the Bulls? Either way, it doesn't really matter. He gets introduced. He's there live with his family, and the guy gets booed by everyone in the place. I just don't understand the direction that they're going there. Like, if they truly thought that somebody was coming up to that second overall pick, like, why not just take Watson? Why not take Mahomes? Why not take someone else? Like, you have Glennon there. Like, the quarterback doesn't need to start right away. So, like, I don't know. I just don't get it.
Can I pile on here with their second round pick, which I thought was a joke? Adam Shaheen, the tight end from Ashland, who I see why people like love him as a project tight end. He's 6'6", like 260, big time athlete. But his tape against Ashland it isn't like what Cooper Kupp was doing when he played for Eastern Washington. He wasn't just absolutely dominating. And when tight ends who, in my opinion, are better are lasting to the fifth round, that's terrible value there in the second round. Like, okay, if I get it if he's your guy at the second round, whatever. But the fact that all those other really, really good tight ends lasted till round 5 makes it look so much worse from a value perspective.
I don't know,
absolutely.
that's like the one pick I can get behind because Ashland, I don't know if you know this, it's tight end U. So they're really just pumping out a lot of good tight ends.
Like the only pick I liked that the Bears made was taking Eddie Jackson in the 5th round. Just seems smart from a value standpoint. Like before he broke his leg, he's probably a day 2 pick.
Yeah, he's a great guy too. He's just like a guy your fan base can get behind and really wants to cheer for.
And they need that with all those boos.
Did the Bears quickly become the least competent team in the NFL over the last 2 months?
Man, Ryan Pace, I don't know what that guy's doing. Apparently John Fox didn't know Trubisky was going to be their pick.
Yeah, exactly.
What?
Trubisky didn't even know he was going to be the pick.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
Ryan
didn't
Pace
he say he didn't even get a phone call?
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? Like, what are the Bears aren't even competent enough to, like, dial phones anymore? Like, why are these people in charge?
Fox is an old school guy, too. How mad do you think he was when they traded up to take Trubisky?
I don't get
And
it.
just to bring up a theory of mine, did the Cleveland curse move from the shores of Lake Erie to the shores of Lake Michigan? You know, 2 teams, Cleveland Browns, CB. Chicago Bears, CB. The Browns had a nice draft. The Bears had a terrible draft. Both are positioned on the south shore of 2 Great Lakes. I think the curse is
Wow.
moved, guys.
Stay woke. Holy.
Okay. Casey mentioned it earlier, but let's talk about some of our favorite steals of this draft. Unless you guys want to kick on some other draft classes. Cough, the Chiefs, cough.
Yeah, I think the Chiefs draft was terrible aside from Kareem Hunt in the third round.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, steals. Casey, who were you thinking as the steal of this draft?
Like I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I'm gonna go with two Bengals actually. Both the edge rushers that they got in the third and the fourth round, Jordan Willis and Carl Lawson. Like I would have taken Lawson over Willis, but apparently there's some sort of medical thing there that made
Yeah,
Lawson fall. Either way, like even if he's like a one contract player, I could see him being effective like immediately. Like he's a guy that like if I were to pick one edge player to rush once to end a game at the very start of the season, I would have picked Carl Lawson. Like
wow.
I would have put my faith in him over Miles Garrett. Like if you were only getting one, I guess maybe Tim Williams. That
Yeah,
would have been
mine
a good answer too.
mine would
But
be Tim.
it'd be between Lawson and Williams. And like I just think if you get Jordan Willis in the third and come back around and get Lawson in the fourth, like I just see that as insanely good value. Like Willis had a top 10 combine.
Yeah,
Like
no,
if you
definitely.
went only by combine and then you drafted those players, like he would have went in the top 10 easily. And you go on his tape, like sure, it's not always pretty, but it's productive. And if you mix production with athleticism, like what else are you looking for? So I think Willis in the third is great value.
I think the Bengals had a really nice draft as a whole. Like John Ross in the first, it's a little high in my opinion for John Ross, but he's going to be a guy that's going to be a game breaker. Uh, the second round guy, he's got some question, but he's a good football player. And like you mentioned,
Fucking
Willis and Law.
Voldemort.
Yeah, I won't say his name. Uh, and then you said Lawson and Willis. This really nice draft class. And a steal I'll throw out there. You mentioned tight ends falling to the fifth. This tight end fell to the sixth in Bucky Hodges. And I have no idea why he fell. The dude's an absolute freak. He's like 6'5", 260. Unfortunately, he went to Minnesota and he'll never get the ball. But I think it's still a steal in that position, and I don't know why he fell. Another steal for me, Desmond King in the fifth. Nice spot there in LA. He could have been a third, 3-4 round guy, third, fourth round guy. I like the player. I like the fit. I think I like the Chargers draft a lot too. Doubling down with Lamp and I'm blanking. Who's the other guard?
Feeney.
Feeney, yeah.
Feeney.
Feeney
That fit.
falling to the third was insane because a lot of people thought he was going to end up going in the end of the first. So they got a
And
pretty good steal in those two picks. And Lamp like got
Lamp,
talked
yeah,
as a top 10 guy, which I
yep,
thought was a little bit rich, but I really enjoyed Lamp on tape, and I think he's a freak athlete too, which is what they needed there.
yeah. Phillip Rivers must be pumped with those two guards coming in, and Mike Williams, maybe the best wide receiver in the class. Rob, who's your steals?
You guys, Casey especially is gonna appreciate this. Buda Baker falling to round two, and then the Cardinals taking him,
Yeah, that doesn't
Ugh.
make sense. Like, why did he fall?
and the fact that Arizona took him, man, that defense is gonna be fun. Him and Reddick,
Yeah, I do not like that as a Seahawks fan.
like Buda's Tyrann Mathieu, but like healthy and maybe better. Having both of those guys add so much like scheme versatility to their coverage and how exotic they can look. It's gonna be so cool.
Yeah, like too bad they didn't have anyone on the D line. Like that defense would be unbelievable. But like
Oh
at the
yeah.
same time, like that back end, like you can have Buddha or the Honey Badger come in and play slot. You can have them both play single high coverage. You can have them debatably play outside corner on a couple snaps across from Patrick Peterson. Like you can go so many different directions with those three alone that
Yeah,
like you've immediately baked in like a ridiculous amount of versatility to your defense. You don't need to match or you don't need to exchange as many people between plays to match up with certain offenses. You can just move guys around, and like that makes your defense immediately better.
all right, something that we didn't have prepared, but it's very on topic with doubling down with Honey Badger and Buddha. How about the selections of Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel by the Panthers?
So I thought it was really weird. Multiple teams seem to double down, not in just taking, let's say, a running back in round 2 and a running back in round 6, but like with early picks doubling down on similar guys, which starts with the Panthers taking two very similar offensive weapon guys, McCaffrey and Samuel. Both like Samuel was more of a receiver running back and McCaffrey more of a running back receiver, but both very similar skill sets. And I know like not a lot of people love Curtis Samuel because drops and whatnot, but adding both those guys, I think, adds so much versatility to that offense. You can line them up, both up in the slot, both can line up in the backfield. I just thought that was pretty cool that they went ahead and did that. Adds a lot of speed to their offense.
I think if you're going to line them up and you're going to try to pass to both of them, I don't like either of the picks because Cam's going to overthrow both those tiny guys all day.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
The only thing that like really makes sense for me is if you're going to line up and do some sort of triple option, which I think could be deadly with the combination of Cam, McCaffrey, and Curtis Samuel. I think if you're going to do that where any one of them could run at the same time, or you could do some sort of triple option pass plays, like on top of that, like your offense could be really fun to watch at least.
That is exactly what I was going to say. I mean, I don't mind both doubling down on both players, but I don't like where it is and exactly how you said, Casey. Cam's gonna throw 50 feet over these guys' heads.
Just so it's clear, I love Cam and these guys are both wrong, and I think this was very smart of Dave Gettleman to double down on these quick offensive weapons.
Yeah, but like you're seeing articles like, oh, the Carolina Panthers just did a draft that means they're the future of football. Like that's so dumb. Like, and if this was on other teams with like, you know, if Phillip Rivers had Christian McCaffrey and Curtis Samuel, I think that'd be fun. But as Casey said, if you're doing this triple option, that'd be really cool. But I don't know if they're going to.
All right, another team that doubled down. Casey already talked about this, but the Bengals going back-to-back rounds with Jordan Wilson, Carl Lawson, which I think is awesome because they had a need for the edge and they got two huge value picks in round 3 and 4. Two guys who are both athletic freaks, real good pass rushers. You can kind of use them both in a variety of ways.
Just kind of taking your thoughts on the macro point of view and applying it to where I think it's coming from. I think a lot of these GMs have been playing too much Madden. And if anyone who drafts a lot in Madden knows that you miss a lot. So if you have a true need, you're going to need to take 5, 6, maybe even 7 round picks all at the same position. So you're going to sit there and draft like 7 offensive tackles if you need one because you know that they're eventually going to, like one of them's going to pan out. So I think this is like a slightly more professional version of that. So like people doubling down is just like if Jordan Willis doesn't work out, Carl Lawson probably will. So why not?
But how weird is it that neither of these guys fit the typical Bengal defensive end guy?
I like that because I hated that they stuck to those traits. For those that don't know the Bengals DN traits, which I'm guessing is most, they like guys that are about 8 feet tall and ridiculously unathletic. Carlos Dunlap was the one exception to that, but like every other DN they've had from like the 90s to like the mid to late 2000s was all 6'7" or taller and like limited athleticism. So it's good to see them deviate from that because they needed a speed guy. Like Dunlap's great and he has a good bend for his size, but like they needed a speed guy across from him, and getting 2 of them in this draft it's good. Like I see no downside to drafting 2 of those guys.
Rob, do you have any other double downs that you want to touch on aside from our favorite sandwich, the KFC double down?
So the Cowboys also doubled down on corners, going with Chidobe Awuzie and Jordan Lewis, who are both probably their best spots are in the nickel. Then my favorite double down, the LA Chargers, we already touched on this a bit, going Forrest Lamp and Dan Feeney at guard. They get 2 instant plug-and-play guards there. Then the LA Rams, who are really going to commit to this wide-open spread offense, I think, taking Cooper Kupp and Josh Reynolds at receiver. Both pretty solid value picks. The New York Jets, first and second round, I don't know anyone who was expecting this. Going Jamal Adams, great pick there. And then Marcus May, the safety, also a safety in the second round, which I'm a fan of.
Everyone knows that if you're going to start building a team from scratch, you start with those safeties.
I just like it
once you lock those in, like you can build your team around them, and like you just have 12 years of the future.
The Jets are such a locker room problem. two are like two of the best leaders in the class. That's why I love it. And you're getting a strong safety and a free safety who can both be day one starters. The Eagles doubled down on Sidney Jones and Rasul Douglas, the cornerbacks. Less
I
of a
like that too.
double down though, because I'm assuming they're expecting Sidney Jones won't be ready from the Achilles tear right away, but I like that as well. And then the
Mhm.
Titans, like the Bucks did getting Jameis weapons, the Titans went ahead and took Corey Davis and Tywan Taylor, the wide receivers.
And Jonu Smith,
Yeah,
the best
so
tight end in the
yeah,
class.
who's basically a receiver. So yeah, that's a triple down.
Whoa. Casey, what are your macro thoughts on this draft class?
My first macro thought is that KFC really needs to come in and sponsor us. KFC, where good food is. That's their tagline, right?
Yeah, yeah. Some may say it's finger licking good, but no, it's where good food is.
Okay, perfect. No, like one major macro thing that I noticed was there was a surprising run on offense. It's especially high in this draft. Like
Yep.
you saw three receivers go in the top 10 and everyone saw like some of those receivers dropping down into like the late teens, even into the 20s. But like I think what caused it was that everyone knew that there was so much talent and depth on the defensive side that they kind of needed to sneak in early with
Yeah.
those offensive picks, and then they could swing back around in the mid rounds. And we're talking about draft steals. Like a lot of the steals were on defense,
Yeah. No,
like, and
absolutely.
that was across the league. So I kind of see where they're coming from. It was just surprising at start because like everyone talked about how this draft was so heavy on defense. Three game changers in this draft, in my mind, were all on defense. So
Yeah, like going three wide receivers in the top 10, no one really saw that at all. Like the later mock drafts, there was really no receivers going in the top 10. All right, let's move on and look at the rookie class from a fantasy perspective and hit you some over-unders on some of the top 10 offensive players that we just talked about. And Rob, you want to get us started with Leonard Fournette?
Yeah, so I said his over-under is at 1,100 rushing yards,
Whoo!
4.5 yards per carry, and 7 touchdowns.
I'm going to take under on the yardage for sure. I think that's I know they added Cameron Robinson, but that's still a bad offensive line. And Blake Bortles doesn't do too much to blow your hair back and opening up the offense. And if they're leaning on Leonard Fournette a lot, especially at the 4.5 yards per carry, I don't see that happening either.
I
Uh,
think they're like Zeke had 322 carries this year,
yep.
and I'm thinking Fournette's gonna have at least 250.
My issue is, and I watched a lot of Jaguars games last year, unfortunately, and once they try to establish the run early, and then they get behind in games, and it's just all Blake Bortles in the shotgun trying to whip the ball downfield and throwing
yeah,
interceptions off
I
players'
think
feet.
this team's a lot better than last year's team, obviously aside from quarterback. But
Hmm.
I think if they're relying on their defense and their run game, I
Yeah.
think I think all those numbers are very attainable for Fournette. But again, I'm higher on Fournette than both of you guys.
Yeah, I can see an over on the touchdown number. I can see that. How about you, Case?
yeah, I'm gonna go under on all of them, and kind of like just building off what AJ said. Like they do try and establish the run at the start, and that's where like everyone's talking like, oh well, they did run a lot of like power and stuff like that, or like from under center,
Yep.
and they did, but like on average, most of that happened at the start of the game. They would just immediately give up in the second half and just run out of
Exactly.
shotgun. And
Yep.
that's kind of where you see Blake Bortles thrive. Like his numbers are still kind of garbage, but relative to the first half numbers, his second half numbers are insanely good. And I think a lot of that comes from they spread their offense out completely and run out of the shotgun. They run a lot of no huddle. And I just don't see like I think their offense immediately becomes more predictable now because when Fournette's in, you know they're going to be under center and you know they're going
Yeah.
to be trying to pound the rock. And when he's not in, you know they're going to be in shotgun, and it's going to make subbing in and out defensive players like extremely easy.
I totally agree, except for the fact that Blake Bortles' great numbers is also coming from being down by 50 points in the game and it being garbage time. So
That does help,
Uh,
but like we've seen when they spread it out, like
oh, I'm not
well, spread
disagreeing.
offenses in general are obviously easier for quarterbacks, so it makes sense that it's easier for Blake Bortles as well.
No, absolutely. Like Bortles is a better fit in the shotgun spreading the field out. I was just trying to kick the Jags a little bit. As for me, my guy was Corey Davis, and I'm going to set the line at 850 yards and 8.5 touchdowns.
I think it's going to be close on the yardage. I think they're going to. He has the skill set and the athleticism and ability to work in early, and we've seen that they will. They do have a willingness to work in a rookie receiver. So I could see them being slightly over on the yards. I don't know if he is gonna get all of those touchdowns though, because you still have Delaney Walker, you still have all of those other targets, and at the same time, like I don't think Marriott is going to be throwing 40 touchdowns. So I think 8.5 may be a bit rich for my blood touchdown wise.
Fair enough. Robbie?
So I'm thinking over on the yards for sure. And last year, Rashard Matthews had 9 touchdowns. He had 945 yards and 9 touchdowns. I'm
Yeah.
expecting a lot of those targets to just be absorbed by Corey Davis because he's so much more talented.
Yeah.
And Mariota was starting to look really good by the end of the year, so I'm going to go over on both those numbers.
Okay, fair enough. And how about you, Casey, with Christian McCaffrey?
Christian McCaffrey, I don't have a per touch stat going
That's
for him,
fine.
but I do have 900 total yards and 6 touchdowns.
I agree with you for not putting the per yard thing because for him, he's not like Fournette's not going to do anything from a total yards standpoint. Like he's not going to add
Yeah.
much as a receiver. So I like that you went with the total yards opposed to just the rushing yards. And what'd you say? 900 total yards and how many touchdowns?
In six.
I'm going to take the over on the 900 total yards, but the under on the 6 touchdowns. I just think
Uh,
I think he's going to add probably a 500 type year because I think they're not going to just they're going to give Jonathan Stewart carries until he's injured again. And and
Week 5.
yeah, but McCaffrey's going to add a ton of value as a receiver. So I'll take the over for sure on the total yards, but I'm not seeing him scoring that many touchdowns because they're just they love letting Cam score rushing
yep.
touchdowns and
Yep.
pounding it to Stewart. So I think not that he couldn't, but he just won't be put in a situation where he'll be able to.
That's exactly my thought too. I'll take the over on the yardage, under on the touchdowns because they're gonna let Cam just pound the ball in, and give Jonathan Stewart handoffs and stuff. As for fantasy sleepers, Rob, who do you have?
Joe Williams, the Utah running back, who the 49ers drafted in the fourth round, and I really liked watching him at Utah this year, but the big knock on him was he quit on the team halfway through the year. He retired and left the team for a month, then unretired and came back and carried the team. So a
Yeah.
lot of like football guys didn't like that he left the team, but there's a lot of talent there with Williams. And apparently he was the only running back that Shanahan wanted in the draft. And Shanny has a history of getting the most out of late round running backs. And also I think Carlos Hyde has shown he's a pretty injury prone player. So I
Yeah.
think Joe Williams has a chance to be getting a lot of touches by the end of the year.
Yeah, that's fair. Hyde is the number one back there though if he stays healthy. For me, I'm gonna go with Wayne Gallman, the running back out of Clemson. And he put up great numbers at Clemson, even with all the other weapons that they had there. Deshaun running the ball too. Mike Williams, of course. And he goes to a backfield in New York, the Giants, with no great talents. Paul Perkins is a good player. Didn't do too much last year. And I think there's a chance that Wayne Gallman ends up with the bulk of the carries. I know the Giants scheme in running the ball leaves a lot to be desired from a fantasy perspective, but for a sleeper, if he ends up being the bell cow, well, I don't think he's being a bell cow, but if he ends up being the number one touch guy in the backfield, he could be some really good value. Probably picking him up off waivers at week 3 or whatever. Anything else, guys?
I think Paul Perkins is a pretty talented back. But
too.
I think Gallman. Well, you know what? For that Giants stupid 11 personnel only offense, Perkins is a better fit than Gallman. But I do really
That's
like
fair.
Gallman, so I think a lot of that's not gonna have to do with Gallman himself, but more so with um,
The Giants game.
McAdoo and like what he's if he's got his mind in the right place.
Yeah, I agree. I like Gallman as a player a lot, though. I like the pick, but yeah, I don't know. All right, guys. I think that will do it for this episode. And Rob, do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, so later this week for armchairallamericans.com, I'm going to be writing a my favorite scheme fits for some of the top draft picks.
All right, sounds good. How about you, Casey? Anything going on at the chip factory there?
Yeah, some more chips made today, you know.
Really?
The word hero gets thrown around a lot, but I'm just an everyday person, so.
Wow.
All right. And for us, you can follow us on Twitter at RTSPod, and do not be afraid to add us with your comments, questions, tweet of the week, whatever. I know
Please
how
tweet at us. Please tweet at us.
I get how everyone is, really shy on Twitter and doesn't want to share their opinions. So don't be, and tweet at us. You can check out our website, wrestlingthestarters.podium.co. And please also rate and review us on iTunes so other people can suffer in listening to this podcast. We reach more people. Just search Wrestling the Starters and rate and review, guys. It genuinely helps us. For Casey Fleming and Rob Paul, I'm AJ Marchese saying goodbye, alligator.